Todd, welcome back to the show, and congratulations on an outstanding meet.
Thank you very much.
I had Chad Brown on last week, who's been chasing you throughout the meet, and I asked him this question. Did you have certain expectations at the start of the Saratoga meet, and how have the results lived up to those expectations?
Well, you know, we obviously always want to do well at Saratoga. We emphasize the meet, and it works out well for our program because we have a lot of 2-year-olds that just naturally, by their normal progression and the calendar itself, they're getting ready at this meet. So I've always said that our success at the Saratoga meet is greatly dependent on how our 2-year-olds run. And we've been fortunate that our 2-year-olds have been running extremely well. In addition to that, you know, our stake program's been pretty strong. So it's difficult in our line of work to put specific goals. I want to win 12 races or 20 races, but I felt like with the number of starters and the way the first condition book set up for us that we had a chance to have a pretty strong meet.
Well, let's take a look at a very strong last Saturday that you had, beginning with the Travers. Stay Thirsty is number 9. Things may not have developed early on the way you expected, but in the end, he ran very well.
I thought he ran huge. It didn't unfold at all like we wanted it to. It unfolded a little bit like we thought it might, and a lot of it depended on what Shackelford did coming out of the outside post from the 10 hole. What we were hoping would happen would be that he would clear us going to the first turn, and then we could inherit kind of that garden spot stalking him. Our horse stumbled at the start and kind of got up a little bit angry and was just really aggressive with Javier going to the first turn. And Shackelford was content to stay just outside of us, and I really wasn't happy going into the first turn. I didn't like the way it was unfolding at all. I thought he was too keen. I didn't like him being inside of Shackelford. And Javier was doing everything he could to get him back, and finally, just when they turned up the backside, he's able to ease him back and pop outside of Shackelford, and I thought, okay, great, now we're going to get a little bit of a breather here. No sooner did that happen, and then Emma Jane Wilson was right next to him and putting more pressure. So what was so impressive to me was that he ran every step of the way, every step of the 1.25 miles. He was there, and every time Javier asked him for a little more around the far turn and down the stretch, he delivered.
Todd, we know that young horses, and 3-year-olds are obviously young horses, mature at different times. Was Stay Thirsty a bit of a late maturing horse? I mean, prior to the Belmont, you know, the race in Florida was not good at all. The Derby was just decent, just respectable, but he seemed to really blossom when you got him back to New York.
He really did, and you know, last year, a year ago, Mike Rapoli and I were talking. You know, we have a son of Bernardini that's a half-brother to Andromeda's Hero, who was second in the Belmont, and he ran very competitively first time out at 5.5, breaks his maiden at 6, and then comes back and is a good second in the Hopeful. So we're thinking, he's way ahead of schedule for anything that we anticipated he would be ready to do. But then after winning the Gotham, I think we made a mistake. We brought him back to Florida. We ran into probably the hottest day of the winter that day. And he just got very hot in the paddock, and I think left his race, you know, before he even got onto the racetrack. And the Derby was not a bad effort, as you said, but it wasn't the same kind of effort we've seen since then. And I don't know really why, but as soon as we got back to Belmont after the Kentucky Derby, he trained like a different horse and a much better horse. And we saw it immediately in his breezes there, and the strength of his gallops out changed a lot. He just really blossomed during that five week period. And so we weren't at all surprised that he ran as well as he did in the Belmont. And then, as well as he was training at Belmont, as soon as we got to Saratoga before the Jim Dandy, he even brought it up another level. So I think part of it's just natural maturity. It's hard to explain sometimes why horses take longer to develop. I guess they're like people, you know, some are earlier matures than others. But based on his pedigree, being a grandson of A.P. Indy, and Bernardini was obviously better when he got older, I think it's just a natural thing for him.
We talked about the fact that he never got a breather here really for 10 furlongs, and a lot of people are focusing on the slow final quarter. Does that concern you at all?
No, I think the way the race unfolded and how demanding the main track has been here, and we've seen it particularly in the 2-turn races. It wasn't a fast last quarter, but you know, every quarter up to the last one was 24 and change. and then he comes home in 26, which I think is respectable at 1.25 miles, especially the way this track's playing. And I don't think it was honestly quite as strong a performance as his Jim Dandy, but I think given the circumstances and the trip that he got, it was maybe a more courageous effort.
How did he come out of the race?
Came out of it excellent, really well. He bounced out of it with good energy, and he's been back on the track a few days, and I'm really liking what I'm seeing.
How do you get him? What's the best route to get him to the Breeders' Cup Classic?
I think the best route for us is to come back in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, keep him at 1.25 miles. He's run well at Belmont. He's trained well at Belmont. The negative is we're going to meet older horses for the first time, and when you look at horses like Tisway and Flat Out, who's running in the Woodward, it's potentially going to be a very, very tough field. If we wanted to stay against 3-year-olds, a week before that's the Pennsylvania Derby, but Mike and I talked about it, and we felt like he likes Belmont. Mike's a New York guy. That's our headquarters, so right now we're planning to stay home.
A race prior to the Travers, the King's Bishop, and the return of Uncle Mo, his first start since Wood Memorial Day. How confident were you going into the King's Bishop that you had him, listen, 7/8 of a mile up here is tough. How confident were you had him fit enough and tight enough to run in the King's Bishop?
I felt like based on the training that we'd been able to do, and we were on a really tight schedule when we got here. The horse arrived on July 11th, and working our way back from August 27th to there, we figured that we had time to get in 5 good works, and we ended up being able to do that on a 6-day schedule. Actually, we got 6 works, but we didn't have any margin for error, and not just to be ready to run, but to be ready to run in a grade 1 going 7 furlongs. So everything went beautifully according to plan. One time we adjusted by moving to work up 1 day ahead of time to beat some rain. Aside from that, his schedule went great. What gave me confidence that he was fit enough to run was he had worked in company with Keisha Electronica, 5/8, who had won 2 races at the meet, and Turbo Compressor, who won the Curlin Stakes at 1 1/8 miles. And all 3 of those works, he was the stronger of the workmates. And so I really felt good about the way he was coming into the race. And I thought he ran an unbelievable race. It was a really, really tough race to lose. We had a bit of an excuse when he broke from the gate. Feel like he stepped on himself a little bit, and he twisted his right hind shoe, which we've seen some pictures since, like inside the 16th pole. The shoe's still on. Somewhere between the 16th pole and when he came back to us, he'd lost that shoe, which I think in retrospect would have been better if he had just taken the shoe completely off. Yeah. But I couldn't take away anything from his effort, and same for Caleb's Posse. He ran a huge race, and sometimes you just get outrun, and but he had no disgrace in it.
Did Johnny say he felt anything? Was the stride unusual?
The only thing that he commented on was when he passed those horses at the stretch, he kind of veered in a little bit, which he's never done before. And putting all the evidence together, he's probably drifting away from that right hind shoe that was just not placed properly at that point. My blacksmith Ray Amato was upset when he heard that the horse had lost his shoe, and I told him what happened was he did such a good job that when he twisted it, the shoe still stayed on, and we'd have been better off if it wouldn't have been on so good.
Mike Rapoli gave us all maybe a little bit of scare in the post-Travers interview when he talked about the possibility, he might have scared you a little bit too, that might have been Uncle Mo's last race. Is that going to be Uncle Mo's last race?
Well, I certainly don't think so, based on what we've seen so far. And I think what Mike was alluding to that was maybe taken a little out of context is, with everything that we went through in the spring, with how sick this horse got, and at that point we were never sure if he was ever coming back when he went to the farm, and it took forever to diagnose what he had, and we were concerned about everything, from a liver disease to cancer to anything, and so. I think the emotional highs and lows of everything that we went through, and then to get beat, on that final jump, a nose. I think what Mike was saying is, if this horse shows us any symptoms again, that will be it. But right now, knock on wood, he's come out of the race really, really well. He looks great. His appetite's great. His hair coat's great. Everything that we didn't have in the spring, we have now. So I think we're leaving the Pennsylvania Derby open as a little bit of an option, but right now, after talking to Mike, I think we're probably going to go to the Kelso at Belmont on October 1st. and take that gradual stretch out to a mile and see how we do, and then that might bridge us to the Breeders' Cup Classic. Or if we decide we want to be a little more conservative, we'd still have the mile as an option.
Boy, that's interesting. 7/8 at Saratoga off a long layoff, then the Kelso at 8 furlongs. If you do decide on the Classic, can you get him to the Classic the way you want him off those 2 races?
Well, what we're going to rely on is him being a super horse, and I think he is. So if he's good enough, I hope we could get enough out of the Kelso, and with some proper training in between. The big plus we have is we know he loves Churchill. His Breeders' Cup juvenile win was huge, so that's a big edge, and we'll just have to play it by ear.